Let's talk about trade policy. Yes, it matters, even if it usually sounds like something only economists care about. But what happens when trade policy becomes the center of a national debate? That's exactly what just happened. The Supreme Court just made it headline news, putting itself right in the middle of a high-stakes economic showdown. In a landmark decision, the court told the president, "No, you can't unilaterally impose massive tariffs on the world." The message was clear. Even the highest office in the land has limits. This isn't just about steel or washing machines, it's about the very boundaries of presidential power and the checks and balances that define American democracy. For years, the administration used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to justify sweeping tariffs, arguing that national security was at stake. The strategy was simple but bold. Declare a national emergency, then tax imports at will, bypassing Congress and traditional oversight. But the Supreme Court just slammed the brakes, ruling that this approach overstepped constitutional boundaries and threatened the separation of powers. The decision impacts small businesses struggling with rising costs, everyday consumers facing higher prices, and America's global relationships with key trading partners. It forces a fundamental rethink of U.S. trade policy and reasserts Congress's authority to regulate commerce, reminding everyone that no branch can go it alone. The administration wanted a blank check to act as it pleased. The court bounced it, sending a powerful message about limits. Now, the future of U.S. trade is uncertain. Businesses and policymakers alike are left wondering what comes next, as the rules of the game have fundamentally changed. This is a constitutional check that will echo for decades, shaping not just trade, but the very balance of power in America. To understand this showdown, let's rewind to the Trump administration's trade philosophy. Tariffs as a hammer for every problem. The administration saw tariffs not just as a tool, but as a primary weapon in their economic arsenal, wielding them to address a wide range of issues, both foreign and domestic. Need leverage with China? Tariffs. The administration imposed billions in tariffs on Chinese goods, aiming to force new trade deals and address what they called unfair practices. Concerned about Mexico? More tariffs. Threats of tariffs became a negotiating tactic, used to pressure Mexico on issues like immigration and manufacturing. The administration claimed it was protecting American jobs and national security, but often bypassed Congress to do it, raising questions about the limits of executive power. Instead, they used the IEEPA, a law originally meant for emergencies like terrorism or war, to justify broad tariffs, stretching its intent far beyond what lawmakers had envisioned. By declaring a national emergency over trade deficits, the administration claimed sweeping powers, arguing that economic threats justified extraordinary action. Critics called it executive overreach, arguing the IEEPA was never meant for trade wars. Legal scholars and politicians from both parties warned this set a dangerous precedent. Lawsuits piled up from businesses hit hard by sudden costs. Many small business owners and manufacturers said the tariffs threatened their survival, leading to layoffs and closures. Lower courts began siding with challengers, saying the president couldn't invent emergencies to rewrite trade law. Judges questioned whether economic disputes truly qualified as national emergencies. The stakes were so high, the Supreme Court had to step in. The nation watched as the highest court prepared to decide the limits of presidential power. This wasn't just about tariffs. It was about the balance of power between the branches of government and the future of how America handles economic crises. The legal battle was inevitable, with both sides digging in for a fight that would shape the country's approach to trade and executive authority. And now, after years of legal wrangling and national debate, the highest court has spoken, setting a precedent that will echo for years to come. The core question: who sets tariffs, the president or Congress? The Constitution gives Congress the power to tax and regulate foreign commerce. Traditionally, presidents needed Congress to pass new tariffs. The administration argued the IEEPA's broad language let the president act alone during emergencies. Opponents said this twisted the law's intent, warning it would erase Congress's role in trade. Allowing this would let any president impose massive taxes with a single declaration. The Supreme Court had to decide, can emergency powers override explicit constitutional authority? The answer would reshape the balance of power for generations. This was a classic clash between executive ambition and constitutional limits. The administration argued the courts should stay out. National emergencies are the president's call. They claimed the IEEPA was intentionally broad for unforeseen threats, and tariffs were vital leverage. The opposition countered, tariffs are taxes, and only Congress can create taxes. Small businesses described crippling costs and layoffs. Critics warned of a slippery slope. Unchecked power could let any president bypass Congress for anything. The Supreme Court had to decide if the president could use emergencies as a loophole. This wasn't just a legal debate, real people felt the pain. Behind every policy decision there were families, workers, and communities struggling to adapt to sudden changes. Small businesses across America faced soaring costs for imported parts, forcing tough choices: absorb losses or raise prices. Many owners worried about keeping their doors open, as profit margins shrank and uncertainty grew. Farmers suffered as other countries retaliated, slashing demand for U.S. crops and hurting rural communities. For many, generations of hard work were suddenly at risk, and the future felt more uncertain than ever. The tariffs, meant to help, often did the opposite, hurting the broader economy. Factories slowed production, layoffs increased, and entire towns felt the ripple effects. Globally, allies like India faced uncertainty as the U.S. used tariffs as leverage, straining relationships and prompting new trade alliances. Long-standing partnerships were tested, and new economic blocs began to form in response. The economic fallout was widespread. Higher prices for consumers, instability for businesses, and diplomatic rifts. Everyday Americans noticed their grocery bills rising, while business leaders scrambled to adapt to shifting markets. While a few industries saw short-term gains, most Americans paid the price. The benefits were uneven, and for many, the costs far outweighed any temporary relief. The opposition's Supreme Court case was fueled by these real-world impacts. Communities rallied, hoping for a decision that would ease their burdens and restore stability. This wasn't just about legal theory, it was about protecting people and the economy. The stakes were high, and the outcome would shape the lives of millions. The evidence was clear. The costs outweighed the benefits. Economists, business owners, and families all pointed to the same conclusion. Change was needed. The court's decision reflected the reality on the ground, acknowledging the hardships faced by everyday Americans and the broader global impact. America's trade war had global consequences, reshaping supply chains and altering the balance of international commerce. And the world was watching, waiting to see how America's choices would ripple across borders and affect the future of global trade. The Supreme Court moved fast, recognizing the stakes. Oral arguments were held quickly, and the justices knew billions hung in the balance. In a decisive 6-3 ruling, the court sided against the administration. The majority opinion reaffirmed, the IEEPA doesn't authorize the president to impose sweeping tariffs. Using emergencies to enact nationwide taxes usurps Congress's explicit powers. The court drew a clear line. IEEPA is for targeted sanctions, not broad economic policy. The president can act in a crisis, but not invent new powers. This was a landmark rebuke of executive overreach. Congress, not the president, controls the purse and trade. The precedent is set. Constitutional boundaries matter. With the IEEPA strategy blocked, the administration turned to Plan B, Section 232. This 1962 law lets the president impose tariffs if imports threaten national security. Unlike IEEPA, Section 232 is tied directly to security, giving the president more leeway. The administration signaled it would use this law to keep tariffs in place and possibly expand them. But Section 232 isn't a free pass. It requires a Commerce Department investigation, slowing the process. It's less nimble than IEEPA, but harder to challenge in court. The new strategy justified tariffs as essential to national defense. Expect more debates over what counts as a security threat. The trade war isn't over, it's just shifting tactics. The legal fight continues, but the rules have changed. The Supreme Court's decision is a turning point, but not the end of America First trade policy. The administration will now lean on Section 232, using national security as its rationale. Expect more targeted, but still aggressive, protectionism. Critics say, this stretches the meaning of national security for economic gain. Legal challenges will continue, but they'll be tougher to win. Congress now has a chance to reclaim its authority, if it acts. The future of trade policy will depend on political battles in Congress and the courts. This decision sparks a national debate. Should trade be set by presidential decree or legislative debate? The White House is already testing new legal boundaries. The Supreme Court closed one door, but the struggle over trade power is far from over. America's trade future is being rewritten in real time. So, what's next? The Supreme Court's decision is a major check on presidential power. The administration's shortcut for tariffs is gone, but the trade war isn't over. Section 232 is now the main tool, slower but harder to challenge. The fight shifts from constitutional arguments to debates over national security. Congress faces a choice: reclaim its trade authority or let the executive branch lead. For businesses and consumers, the impact is real. Prices, jobs, and global relationships are all at stake. America's trading partners get some relief, but uncertainty remains. The legal and political battles will shape the economy and America's role in the world. The Supreme Court drew a line, but the push for protectionism continues. Stay informed, because this struggle over power affects us all. The story isn't over.